It's great to see you all, Alley Cat Poets in Mission. Here we are. This is our third gathering, featured poet, Javier Huerta, in the house tonight. And we are doing Floricanto tonight, flower and song, what the poet, philosopher, King Nezhualcoyotl, as he said, the only thing we humans leave behind when we die are our flowers and our songs. If you recall, the Aztecs and the original indigenous Americans produced flowers, turned corn into food, and other things, and our songs, what we produce, are poetry, and this was their word for poetry, floricanto, flower and song. I am a floricanto poet. I have always called myself a floricanto poet. I did not go to college and get an MFA and study poetry that way. I hung out at the Centro Cultural de la Gente in San Jose, California, where poetry and visual art, murals and dance and teatro and music and todo were all combined. Spiritual practice, history, psychology was all combined in one, in a celebration of our humanity. This is original sharing in this continent, and still goes on today in places like rural Mexico, where after dinner everybody comes in the community, comes and sits down, and they read a poem, or they recite something of someone else's, or they tell a story, or they show something, you know, or they play a song or whatnot. When I started out as a young poet, the Floricantos, the first Floricanto was at Santa Clara University, organized by Francisco Jimenez and Elias Rusca Cortez, a Latino poet who taught there. And it was broadcast over KPFA radio. And then the one at UCLA, CSU, LA, Cal State LA? It was in LA.
University of Southern California?
Thank you, yeah, USC, yeah. And then followed by one in San Antonio and then one in Albuquerque. And every year we would have these gatherings, and I started going when I was very young. Floricanto is reading and sharing, would be reading and sharing for days. 10 o'clock in the morning until 2 o'clock at night, when Ricardo Sanchez would finish, because he always wanted to be last, no matter what time it was. So early in the morning, then everybody get together and play music and party all night and have breakfast and maybe crash for a couple of hours and start all over again at 10 o'clock. So believe me, I can hear all the poetry you can give us. But we're only here until 8 o'clock. So I want to hear all of yours, your stories, your songs, whatever you want to share. You're all encouraged to share. This is what a floricanto is. We are all equal here. We are all human beings, and we all leave behind our flowers and songs when we pass. We're celebrating the dead tonight, and in particular celebrating a poet, philosopher, professor. I'll call him a philosopher king because he could have been. Alfred Ortega is a professor at UC Berkeley. He also taught at University of Houston Creative Writing Program. Was the first Chicano poet to get an MFA degree. First Chicano poet to get a degree. He has a degree. He had a degree from Columbia, from the creative writing. That's in New York, in the creative writing program there. He was not a part of the Floricantos because during that time, late 60s, early 70s, he was a prize-winning race car driver. I mean, like big bucks. He had like a Lotus and all kinds of other fancy cars, string of fancy cars. He always won. So he spent about 10 or 15 years doing that before he went off to Houston to get his MFA degree, and then come back to California and go to UC. Well, I guess he went to UC Santa Cruz first, and then went off to Columbia. But anyway, we're celebrating Alfred Ortega. Some of you took classes with him. Some of you knew him. I'd like to share a couple of poems. We got to be very close in San Jose, where I grew up. My brother played music, and if you knew Alfred, he always knew good music was. He always hung out with the good musicians, especially Chicano musicians. So he was a good friend of my brother, the musician, and my brother told him that his sister was a poet. And so he was always real interested that he wanted a Chicana poet, because there weren't very many in those days. He wanted, this was like 73, 74, he 75. He wanted a Chicana poet to come to his class when he was teaching at San Jose City College. And so for the longest time, at least a year, that was kind of like a running joke. Every time I'd see my brother, he'd say, Alfred Ortega wants you to call him. Alfred Ortega wants you to call him. Alfred Ortega. Eventually, I did call Alfred Ortega and read for his class, and we were good friends since then. And he helped me on my press, Mango Press. I started July 4th, 1976. He helped collate this issue. That is at a table, long table. Ah, watch your books here. Sorry about that. Modern and used schools. You didn't see that.
Very resourceful. Very elegant.
I'm used to
Very
spelling
elegant.
Anyway, time to shut up and read. That's what water says. These are a couple of poems, early poems. You got to realize this came out in '78. Two poems by Alfred. Morning. Like an Eskimo clenched above an ice hole, the sun snapped the color up in great rows, a deck of cards where the shadows were, aces and eights to Hickok. Bang! Red-nailed on his black jacket, nailed to the oak floor, harpooning a seal, exactly on the red spot, exactly on the black neck, in the water, in the bourbon, the cards all over, smoke in the air. So even though Alfred was a Chicano poet from East LA, the Chicano critics didn't know what to do with him. Till he became one. Till he became one. Wrote his own book. This is one of my favorites. I printed the magazine, and it had a little press, and a little tiny press. It had a feed tray that would carry about 100 sheets. And I would do, like I did 1,000 of these copies of this issue. So imagine this many pages and standing there and getting the rhythm of putting the stack of 100 sheets in, you know, while it was still going, so I didn't have to start it and stop it. When I would do that, I would focus on certain poems going by, and this is one of them. I still remember the lines of this poem. It's one of my favorite. The man waiting at LA County General. And this was on the birth of his, I think his first daughter. The man waits in the porcelain waiting room, thinking about the rubber hands that will be his child's first touch. The man is not from